the 195th Block Talks, we speak with Ben James, founder of 404, who tells us about decentralized AI through the lenses of an architect. I'm your host, Mauricio Magaldi, and this is Block Drops, your weekly digest on blockchain for business. These news are not a form of endorsement, sponsorship, or encouragement for consumption, and are meant for educational purposes only. All right, everybody, I'm here with Ben James, who's going to tell us who he is and what he does with blockchain. Ben, welcome to Block Talks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, I'm calling in to you from Vienna, Austria, but actually I was born in Florida and am fortunate enough to have US, UK, and Italian citizenship. And I've moved around quite a lot in my life, which I think has influenced a little bit some of the diversity of influences that led me to blockchain here. So my first degree was from the Keenan Flagler Business School. So I have this one part of my life that was focused on strategy and financial consulting before I took a second degree, a master's degree in architecture. And that really started me down on a design track that's much more relevant, I think, to my particular engagement with blockchain. I've always been fascinated by technology. I'm a self-taught coder. Actually, when I started the company, I was coding prototypes myself. What we build is 3D generative AI, and we were doing that before the public releases of Midjourney and ChatGPT. So it was really early on, and we got funding from the European Union to build out our technology according to, at that time, this was again still very early. There was some high-level guidance from the European Union for how to do trustworthy AI applications, so human agency and oversight and data set clarity and all of this, which I think are still fundamentally important today. And so we started building this out in a traditional Web 2 space, working with industry leaders there like Square Enix, doing a lot of virtual world creation, and that tended to manifest itself in game design, film VFX, digital twins, these areas. And the goal of the company was always and still is to democratize content creation in some way. I think AI is very powerful because what it allows is that somebody who is not professionally trained as a 3D artist or content creator can use AI to get past some technical barriers to entry and then create these really interesting manifestations of virtual worlds for whatever their purpose. And that is where I stumbled onto a platform called BitTensor, which is an AI and crypto platform. The goal of BitTensor, when I was reading the white paper, the goal of BitTensor is to use decentralized AI in a way to further these different commodities and intelligence markets. And so what we thought is this is a perfect fit for the type of technology that we've built and that we are building. And so we use the intersection of AI and blockchain as a way to kind of further this particular approach of allowing users, indie game developers, just next-gen content creators, or somebody who's just kind of inherently creative to make virtual worlds for gaming, film, VFX, whatever their purpose, but to use blockchain as a way to programmatically reward certain aspects of this and incentivize the creation of these worlds. And I think, in my particular area of interest, I think there's so many opportunities for game development to then sort of further leverage this. But for me, it's really this perfect combination of decentralized AI, open source technology, and blockchain coming together that enables a new type of interactions in gaming and virtual worlds.
I love that story because it blends three things that I really like. And the first one is that you did not start on blockchain because of the technology. You started because it solved a particular problem in your problem space. And I think that's a lesson to people who are too heavy on the tech or on the token price, that they start by the magic of the technology. The second thing is, I keep repeating myself that AI needs blockchain, and you're smack in the middle of all that. And we're gonna double click on that in a minute. And the third thing is that you're coming from a arguably a even more advanced technology field than blockchains usually are, and you're pulling in capabilities that are unique to that technology, to blockchain, to complement your value chain or your product lifecycle, which to me is the stories I want to hear. So I want to, double click into each of these pillars. Feel free to navigate across them, but can you elaborate on? Am I right in pulling these three things, kind of surface these three things from your story? Can you elaborate more on each one of them?
Yeah, that I think you are right, and I think especially through the guise or the framing of the creative industries, which is where I really have the bulk of my knowledge. I think that becomes particularly relevant. So if you think about um, AI is this tour de force that can fundamentally change the creative industries and can do so in positive and or negative ways. I think we've always focused that putting the creator at the center of that process. I don't think AI is going to replace humans in the creative industries, but I think that a human using AI may replace a human who's not using AI in the creative industries, because what AI can do very well is allow you to augment your creativity or make certain things more efficient that are maybe banal or not inherent to the creativity of your process. Um, but at the same time, you have all of these issues with authenticity and ownership, and how do we make sure that this is done in the right way. And this is where blockchain really shines then, because this is the exact type of information that blockchain can from a technology perspective solve very, very effectively. And so I think we are finding that there's this great merger here of you can use AI to be more creative as somebody in this field. And at the same time, you can use blockchain paired with that AI to track, where did these models come from? Where did the data come from? Where do my outputs go to? How do we as a collective kind of contribute and build on each other's work in a way that's navigable and sort of, able to be understood through on-chain activities. And then I think the other aspect of this is it's not just AI. In our case, it's not just AI and blockchain where there is already a good fit, but it's decentralized open source AI and blockchain. And here it's, in my opinion, kind of the ethos connects in a much stronger way. So, open source is all about community and building together and standing on the shoulders of giants that help us to push this forward, and in addition to sort of combat a lot of the problems with centralized and closed source alternatives. But this is the exact kind of ethos that I think blockchain still enables, especially within the creative communities, where you do, when you think about an AI model that generates imagery, or in our case, we generate 3D assets. It's often sort of the culmination of a lot of different processes and a lot of different people's work that's gone into that, from something very technical like the model weights to something very artistic like the data sets that they were trained on. And I think this is where we can see blockchain providing a key role in helping people, users and end users navigate that.
I tend to agree, and I hate that we agreed so close to the start of the conversation because we're probably not going to disagree with much. But in adopting blockchain, you had a model, like a business model, a product design, ambitions in particular directions. You told us you ran into BitTensor, that clicked, you brought it in. Can you walk us through the journey of identifying that as an opportunity, matching that with whatever design you had before or gaps you found on that model, and the challenges and the maybe the creative engineering that went on into taking something that was, if I'm not mistaken, somewhat ready, and then baking blockchain into it? Was that the case? What was the process like?
Yeah, it's a very interesting process, I would say. So there's a couple of things that work in our favor here. 3D AI, the 3D generative AI, the area of our specialty, is very nascent. It's far more it's developing far quicker than things like language models and 2D AI, which have been around a little bit longer in a more developed state. which means that it's very difficult to keep pace with the innovation. One week it might be this particular paper is the state of the art model. The next week it might be a different form of representation. 3D can take forms of representation like Gaussian splats or radiance fields or meshes. There's still an evolution happening in the space at a breakneck speed. And what we felt that meant, and what we still feel that means, is that as a startup that's trying to provide solutions within the space to game developers and film and anybody making virtual worlds, it's not about building one foundational model. That is computationally intensive, a rather slow process, and will inherently probably be a centralized process. But if you can build an algorithm, or in BitTensor, it's called a validation mechanism, that selects the best model for the best job, or the right model for the right job is probably the way to frame it. This is a far more flexible approach. And it says, let's unleash the creativity of the broader, in this case, decentralized community of miners, they are called on the BitTensor network, to go and solve this problem of a user needs a red axe. What is the right state of the art open source model that I can build upon as a miner to improve the results and return something that the user is looking for? And this might change depending on whether the user is looking for a hero asset, a background asset, a building, a character. And our role as subnet owner here is, how do we set up an incentive mechanism or design an incentive mechanism in such a way that all of the miners and validators, which are the ones that check the miners' work, how do we make sure that they all move in the right direction? How do we make sure that we're all aligned towards doing this? So what is a good example of a red axe? Is it that it matches the user's description very accurately, or is it that it has a very clear structure to it? So aesthetically, it's very nice. Is it that the texture mapped on this is very clean? And it's really a kind of a combination of these things. And this is our role as the subnet owner, is writing some pretty interesting AI algorithms that evaluate all of this in real time, and then setting up the incentive design mechanisms that facilitate that. So this is to say that through BitTensor, and we are one subnet of, there are over 100 now subnets on BitTensor. They all tackle different types of challenges, primarily focused around AI incentive design. But in our subnet, it's about, okay, how do the miners compete with each other to provide the best results? So it's really a competition-based system. And this is interesting because competition can push us towards innovation faster. It can facilitate all of that, but you are competing with members of your own team. Everybody that's in our subnet, all of the miners that are competing to generate this best model for the user, they all want the subnet to create the best models for the users, because that's how we as a subnet thrive. That's how we offer the maximum amount of value collectively. And so the incentive design mechanism is oriented around that a little bit. And so in that competition model, the winning model, the one that is the best fit according to the algorithms that we've written, receives crypto as a reward. So it's part of the incentive mechanism there. But we don't at the same time want to waste any of the compute that went into this. So if you come in second or third, let's say, you've created a really nice 3D model, but it wasn't the best model, so it didn't win the competition. That's saved to an open source 3D data set, which can be accessed by researchers and anybody trying to push research into this field further. And so we've actually, through this type of incentive design, created the world's largest data set for 3D models through all the miners on BitTensor. Actually, we've created a data set that is larger than all of the other 3D data sets combined. So it's really quite remarkable. And then if you're not able to create a model of sufficient quality, so you don't even pass kind of that core benchmark, then you've received no reward, and you've actually kind of expanded resources in order to do that. And this is where then you can be replaced by another miner who's come up, who's doing a better job. But it's a very interesting system, in my opinion, that leverages, incentive design with competition with crypto in order to facilitate innovation. And in the case of our subnet, we see it working very, very well. So even, for example, if while we're on this call, there is some new innovation released by Nvidia or any other kind of major tech player. Doesn't need to be a new foundational model, just some innovation that would allow miners to create better 3D models in a commercially viable way. We will see that those innovations are reflected on the subnet within days, if not hours. That's what we've seen in the past, and the this is the benefit and con of, you know, assembling a car while you drive it down the highway. But it's something that no centralized, no closed source alternative would be able to match the speed and execution that this type of operation runs at.
That's insane. I do have to ask, blockchains are in general not great at storing data. They're more transactional than they are a data store. They're a better store of value than they are a data storage. Um, what is the process you're using to ensure that you maintain efficiency and decentralization while being able to respond to those changes and requests in such a pace?
One of the things that we are a big supporter of is because BitTensor is larger than us. So we run one subnet. We run subnet 17 out of what is now over 100 subnets and growing day by day. And all of these other projects embrace the same sort of ethos and ideology of BitTensor, which is use competition, use incentive design to build to solve some problem. I think at its core. And so there are other subnets that are focused on data storage. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do is, as much as we can, kind of facilitate partnerships where, you know, we would love to embrace that in how we store data. And I think there are benefits then that, you know, if incentivized properly, people can do decentralized data storage. It does have its issues, right? Anytime you work in a decentralized fashion, there are pros and cons to that. But I think, you know, one of my beliefs here is that this is this is the winning approach. And so yes, there are these difficulties in early stages to get through, but especially with the right setup and mechanisms, we will get through that. And then you benefit from being an early adopter of these types of technologies, not only maybe financially in some cases, but also just in being able to shape how these technologies develop. So when we work with other subnets to try to store our data, you know, on chain or through decentralized methods, then we have a meaningful say in letting them know what is working for us, what is not, where a centralized alternative would be something that we prefer in these aspects. And I think that's quite interesting. But it is, you're right, it's a hard problem, especially in our case, because having the world's largest data set, having that in 3D models, even compressed data, is a tremendous amount of data.
Interesting. In terms of your user base, and I'll put my product hat on. Personas wise, demographics, um, what is this? Who's this solving for? What has been the response? And I build for builders myself, and I know that sometimes they will come up with things that you couldn't even imagine, and there they are using whatever you built to, you know, solve a problem that they had that they didn't even know that that would fix, and then they got creative and then used that to their own advantage. So this always amazes me. So what is this like for you in your day to day?
You're right. It's funny. You have some ideas of what is possible, what is not, and then you give this type of technology and access to hundreds and thousands of people, and all of a sudden there are tons of things you didn't expect. And I can talk about some of those. I think the usual use case for us to sort of start on the standard way will be people that are maybe an indie game development studio, maybe just a solo developer trying to create some kind of virtual world experience. Because this is where having the technology in order to supercharge your performance there is a big factor. What Where we don't see so much use case for this is somebody that's already an established really large studio, and that's because they'll have certain workflows and processes that they put into place time and time again, and they're tried and tested processes, and so they'll have their own ways of doing things. But for me, what's really interesting is there is a thesis that there is a new genre of AI native games or AI native films that is coming because of this type of technology. And in the same way that mobile gaming completely disrupted much of the ecosystem when it came, I think this is what even the larger AAA game developers are trying to keep an eye on, because they see that if you can use AI to create games at runtime, you start to enable new possibilities. You start to have personalized game experiences. You start to have user generated content, or UGC, that is wildly more creative than current constructs would allow for. You could have maps of worlds that never end because they're being generated in real time as the player runs through them and reaches the edge. So I think the really exciting thing is that these are ideas that not only I've had, but I've seen different game developers working on using the technology, and I think it is so unbelievably early for where this will go. I really like this. I really like this question that was posed to me once at an engagement I was speaking at. They asked me, or I'll ask you. Do you know what the first television broadcasts were showing?
Was that the static screen?
Well, probably, but I think the first major ones were people reading the radio, because
Oh,
that was what we thought this new medium could be used for.
skeuomorphism. Yes,
Right.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's where we are with AI in the creative industries. We are thinking of the things that at this moment seem out of reach, a game full of personalized user generated content that never ends. But we are so early on in this phase that it is almost difficult to imagine what an AI native game will look like in 5 years. And that's, I think, very exciting.
I have to ask because I've been in crypto for quite some time. I've been doing the podcast for over 5 years. We're in the sixth season, and I've seen stuff. And one of the stuff I saw that I felt was promising, because if I can say this, I'm a former gamer. I grew up playing video games. Is the metaverse, and the metaverse came and conquered, and then waned away. And what you're describing to me sounds like a renaissance, or what could be a renaissance, to an actual blockchain enabled, AI powered version of the metaverse that we couldn't have 2 years ago, because the combination of technologies was not available. We did most of what you just said. We created a skeuomorphic world with the existing technologies of the era, and we're just talking about like 2, maybe 3 years ago. And now we're presented with a combination of technologies that can not only bring those things back, but bring those things back in ways that we cannot yet foresee what the end result's going to be.
Yeah, and at the same time, we probably learned some lessons from that first stage of the metaverse. I think one of the things we learned is that people need things to do in these virtual worlds. And now all of a sudden, take for example, AI can enable a lot more. For example, I've said it a few times, but a lot more types of user generated content, collaborative building environments, things like this. Another thing is, how do you deal with a metaverse when it's first starting? That if there are a lot of people in this metaverse, it will be very engaging, but there are not a lot of people there in the early stages. Again, AI is now in a very interesting state where NPCs, or non-playable characters, could use AI inferenced at runtime to have meaningful dialogues and essentially have a world populated through humans and AI as it grows in a way that would essentially bootstrap a synthetic community of participants in these metaverses. So there are all of these interesting experiments going on, and many ways comes because the technology has developed and come together with other pieces that were already existing there, like this idea of the metaverse.
Especially if you're blockchain based, some of the stuff that we were worried about on like the early metaverse was like identity, right? I could have a predator being disguised as a fairy in a metaverse, and trying to lure kids and things like that. So I think some of these things that are fundamental safety mechanisms for widespread adoption can become more readily available when you're building on a decentralized, immutable provable, deterministic kind of platform. Um, Let me go back to your story, because you're by training, you're an architect, right? Not a systems architect, I believe.
Correct. A built environment architect.
Yeah. How do you bring your training into this particular world? Because I reckon, design, the forms and shapes, and the worlds you're building and the models and all that. I think those are easily understandable, at least to me, that these are portable skill sets. You just spoke very eloquently about incentive mechanisms, which is not something a regular architect would discuss. So that, is probably part of your journey. So in your journey, what were the things that you ported over to the world of AI and 3D and blockchain that were useful to you as you landed in the space and you crafted your own path? And what are the things that you brought on top that combined, enabled you to do what you do today?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two ways that you could look at it. I mean, one is that in starting the company, it was very much um, solving a personal problem that I had had, right? So when I wanted to work on an architecture competition, you have a very short amount of time and you have all of these ideas for what you want to do. It could be a tower, it could be something that's like a more organic form, but you don't have time to test all of this. So you end up with one or two or three, do a quick study and go with your gut and then prototype that up. But if you would be able to have an AI tool like the one we've built, you can really manifest, spatially all of these different iterations very quickly, use them to augment your own intuition and iterate off of that. So I think there's a very practical purpose that led me towards designing this. And then in the early days of the company, we also had very nice conversations. So we spoke with everybody that we felt this could be applicable to. So, for example, game developers, architects, urban planners, film VFX, and the game developers told us right away. They said we are designing more architecture in a single game than an architecture office does in 10 years, and we're not trained as architects, right? So there was a path through my training and background that led me to this way. But to your point, which is now much of my time does spend on things like incentive design and validation mechanisms and deeper 3D AI expertise. I mean, I think this is where, for me at least, I do feel that this strange background of having finance and strategy consulting and self-taught coder and the design perspectives come together in a nice way. So design is about balancing fixed and flexible parameters, right? To get to the right solution, not necessarily the cheapest solution, not necessarily the fastest solution, but the right solution. And that as a construct is very similar to the thinking that goes into designing an incentive mechanism. Then you have elements of tech here. I'm very fortunate that I don't write our code anymore. We have incredibly smart and talented guys with PhDs from top universities that write that. But I understand the logic of how these systems work, and so to some extent, the logic of how a 3D AI system works can inform the types of incentives that you can provide it. So you're often looking at multiple views of an object distilled into 2D imagery, and that then carries with it another set of AI algorithms that you can run on top. And then I think finally, my time in finance and strategy consulting, obviously it helps significantly with running a business like we are doing. But it's also, my area was always kind of these complex financial models and forecasting these out. And I think you're always, when you bring finance or when you bring blockchain into things, you are thinking about how do you prevent exploits, how do you make this foolproof, how do you make the you're dealing with very valuable assets of either yourself or others. And so I think there's elements of that. And then of course there's no getting around that. I've just had to learn a lot quickly, and you learn to swim in the deep end. You are here within a system, and you're trying to build everything as you design it and think about it. And I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded by very intelligent people, both on sort of tech and business fronts and blockchain fronts as well. So I think that's helpful. I will also flag that the BitTensor community is one of the most most impressive communities that I've been a part of. Everybody is very willing to help you, and everything, not just we build, but the other subnets build, is open source, so you can learn from how an image subnet might deal with their incentive mechanisms, or you could learn how a language model subnet might deal with a potential exploit or vulnerability that they have. And so I think that's definitely been a steep learning curve, but a good one.
I think I had another one of the projects running on BitTensor, Masa AI, Masa Finance, their DeFi automation bot trader. Very interesting as well. Um, in terms of the amazing things you've seen, I think we spoke a lot about the good side of the stuff you've been through. But life as an entrepreneur, especially in crypto, edge technology like you're bringing to life, what are the top three challenges and hardships you have to go? You became an entrepreneur, which is hard enough in and on itself, but what are maybe the top three challenges you've gone through, and what were your strategies or approach to overcome them, and what did you draw from them?
I think one of the challenges that everybody faces in their entrepreneurship journey, I think whether it's crypto or not, is that you have to have thick skin. You're going to get rejected many times. You'll get rejected from VCs. You will get rejected from customers. You will get all of this, and you really just have to learn to filter out what can you learn from that, how can you improve from that. I think sometimes being an entrepreneur is interesting because you'll get a lot of diverse opinions into guidance for you to move forward, and they're all coming from genuinely great places, right? An advisor who's successfully formed and exited their company will give you their advice, and it comes from their experience and how they would do it. An investor who is invested in you, who wants you to succeed, who has a financial interest in you succeeding, will give you their advice. Customers who want the best product available will give you their advice. And being able to kind of balance that and still have your own sort of internal North Star that you're guiding towards, I think is one thing. Maybe a second one would be, you know, in AI and crypto, this world moves so quickly. So it's difficult sometimes to figure out how much significance you give to changes that you see happening in trends, because it's very easy to pivot, and maybe even pivot too much, because this week there's a new paper out, and it looks very, very promising, and all of a sudden maybe this is kind of a core foundational technology that should be built around, or maybe there's a new network out there, or maybe there's a new project out there that would enable or claim to enable certain benefits for you. So at the same time, you don't, my opinion is, you don't want to keep changing. Yeah, you want to move in the direction that you believe there is real value to be had and to be captured and to be delivered to end users. But you should be conscious of significant trends that are changing in the industry. I mean, we are a company that started on just a few months before AI became a significant trend in this industry. And so it's obviously served us very well, but it's very noisy, as they say. There's a lot of confusion around AI. We've seen it evolve over the years. Our first year speaking to customers, nobody knew what it was. Nobody even really believed me that it could be transformational. Then there was the next year at these major conferences, there was huge amounts of skepticism around it. And now there starts to become a certain acceptance, and people starting to appreciate some of the benefits that it can have. But this is a challenge. How do you balance? You don't want to miss the trends, but you also have to maintain your focus. And then maybe on the third one, just to be very, very practical, building on BitTensor, building incentive mechanisms and design in an adversarial system is very, very difficult. And it's difficult for a reason. If successful, you will be far more innovative. Yeah. And that is phenomenal. But at the same time, you have to kind of frame your thinking around an adversarial system. So in our case, for example, when we very first started, we were worried, what if, so our incentive mechanism encourages miners to generate 3D models, and then those 3D models are evaluated from varying camera angles on a variety of different criteria. And we thought, well, what if a miner just decides to generate a cube and project a picture on each of these sides? Could they exploit the validation mechanism? Yeah, it's very, they don't have to run much computation because they're only doing 2D diffusion as opposed to 3D, which is computationally more heavy. And so we had to come up with ways to solve this kind of potential. It wasn't even an exploit; it was just a potential exploit that we had thought through. And so I think this is the kind of thinking that goes into every iteration, every update to the subnet, and it probably makes us better. Hopefully, it also makes the miners better. But it is a challenging world to operate in, where you are operating in this adversarial system, but everybody with the same goal of ultimately improving the quality of the output of this subnet.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what makes blockchains anti-fragile and robust. Interesting example because I remember when I was with IBM, there was a IBM university program back in Brazil, and they had a bus in partnership with, it was a truck in partnership with Silicon Graphics, and they ran live video feed into 3D cubes in a big screen on the side of the truck, and it was similar to your explanation. It just the image hit me. My memory just unlocked from that period. That was funny. As a builder, as a blockchain AI game builder, you're probably in the convergence of industries that give nobody a chance to sleep or to rest. So how do you keep yourself healthy? In, in order to be productive, you have to be healthy. What is your approach to health in this intersection?
One thing, obviously, that I think goes without saying is to surround yourself with capable people. That means people on the team who are capable of building and working autonomously to some extent, and shouldering responsibility. Surround yourself with investors and advisors that can give you the external support and guidance and that you need. So I think that's very critical. Beyond that, I mean, I think it's also nice, or at least I found it important to set some time out of my week that I just know is always for me. Now, usually for me, that means playing football or soccer with some friends on a standing time, where I end up running so much that my brain can't really think about much other than the play at the moment. But I think for other people, that might be meditation, or that might be a less strenuous sport. But I think, for me, one of the realizations was in sort of setting that block of time aside, that it was always going to be, this night of the week, I was going to leave, at a normal hour and go and enjoy this activity, has been nice. And you realize that, look, yes, the world in these three spheres, blockchain, gaming, and AI, is moving very, very quickly. But it can survive you being gone for a few hours to play a match of football. That will be all right, and it's fine that somebody schedules a call with you the next day or something like that. So
Absolutely, and I love that you're into sports, because this is, I think sports such an underrated mental benefit and physical benefit, of course, but mental is so good. Um, and football is a collective sport, even better because you're just playing with other people.
yeah, and it's, I personally also really like that there's a competitive nature of it. So we are friends, but everybody wants to win, and the matches get a bit rough sometimes. And I think there's something kind of nice about that, oddly, that, because for the most part, you don't have that during your week. So
Yeah, it's the adrenaline for sure. And in terms of industry, I mean, again, you're in this it's three-way intersection. What do you think industries need to fix now so we can avoid working the next 20 years and then realizing, oh, we didn't fix that one thing and we're stuck now after 20 years? We're back here. What is that one thing, and why?
in the creative industries, there is a skepticism sometimes towards technology. This idea that technology is trying to take your creativity away. And it's not a skepticism I've ever had. It's not a skepticism I had before I started the company. I've always worked since my time when I left being a financial and strategy consultant. I've always worked at the intersection of design and tech. I've always found tech to be a fascinating complement to creativity. But I think that that is something that slows down certain aspects. It in some studios, it can make for very long working hours. It can make for you know, run over production costs and things like this. A lot of stress as well, and I hope that there will be a sort of an embracing of new technology in the creative industries, not in a way that is, you know, to highlight all of the things that I believe in very firmly, not in a way that replaces the creator at the center of this, not in a way that threatens their job or their creativity, but you know, if we embrace that, we're able to do so many more new interesting things. We're able to do them more efficiently and effectively, which the current model of game production, which is often having hundreds of people without sleep working insane hours to meet a deadline that is not achievable because of the amount, you know, think about just how games have evolved. You know, there's you know, if you look at Lara Croft Tomb Raider character in 1996 or something like that, and you compare it to the latest one, the level of fidelity that has gone into these 3D models and 3D worlds is just going up and up and up. And that's also what consumers are expecting. Compute, you know, hardware is going up. They're able to render larger games with more detail, but the creators behind these games, in some cases, are stuck within this way of working that is not really sustainable, in my opinion, and can be alleviated and helped in a very positive way through technology, like AI technology. And so that would be my hope of something within the creative industries as a whole that we see changing.
I love that angle. I think the first time someone spoke about the nature of our ways of working here, and I subscribe to that for sure. For the people who are from your earlier life that haven't crossed into blockchain yet, and they reach out to you like, "Hey Ben, Bitcoin crossed $100,000, and I'm now interested," or whatever the justification is. What's your usual advice in how to get started in the industry? What to read first? Who to look for? What's that kind of welcome to crypto kit you offer people these days?
My friends said, or colleagues are kind of from two worlds. So the older group from finance and strategy, they are relatively, I think, familiar with crypto, or if they're not, they're at least sort of sophisticated enough with financial instruments to start to deep dive in a smart way. I think with the other side of maybe my friend group, the people that come more from the creative industries and from architecture, I think a lot of my advice there is, look, you know, move in slowly. So I think Bitcoin is a good sort of first coin to get involved with. You know, understand a little bit about the technology or why this could be a good investment, not just because it's crossed the 100K. Yes, and that's interesting, and everybody is telling you this can make a lot of money here, but understand a little bit why you think there's a value proposition here, and then of course I'm happy to give my views on it. But and then I think the other thing that I would often tell people is that, you know, once you've done that, maybe once you hold some ETH or some Bitcoin, you know, think about what would be projects that you want to support. Where do you see value coming from these? And if you're interested in participating within those ecosystems, understand that they are more risky. Understand that there is a macro forces that may be out of the control of the specific project or coin that you are looking to invest in, that can both in a positive and an adverse way affect you. So don't bite off more than you can chew, but if you like these projects, my view in this is that these types of technologies and projects are going to be the future. It's a question of which ones they will be, and that is, in some ways, is anybody's guess is as good as anybody else's. But it is very exciting to be at this precipice and to be looking at these types of technologies and projects, and forming your own personal thesis for what you think is important and why you would deploy capital there.
Thank you so much. We're about time here, but I want you to leave your final words and also how people can learn more about you, your projects, and keep tabs on what you're building. Maybe even reach out if there are gamers here or game builders listening, how they can reach out to you and your folks.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I think we're our website is pretty simple. It's 404.xyz. The numbers 404.xyz, and I think you'd find there a lot of information about how you can generate 3D models for free. Right online, and test it out, and have a bit of fun, because if nothing else, it's pretty fun to see these kind of text prompts manifested in 3D space. Um, I think beyond that, we've got some pretty interesting exhibitions running at the moment. So we are part of the Venice Biennale, which is one of the most prestigious architecture festivals in the world. I think that for me has been very interesting that I had this life as an architect, and somehow by moving into tech and blockchain, I've somehow managed to end up at the world's most prestigious architecture festival. We're also in the World Expo in Osaka. So if people are there, they can also see some of our technology. But in general, anybody is always welcome to reach out to me. I'm sure we'll leave some links in the description here, and I hope people, this tech is really aimed at, you don't know, you're not a professional 3D artist here. So if you have an idea for something cool, a virtual world, a game, a 3D element to your website, a 3D printed model that you want to do, it's pretty simple to engage with, and in my opinion, a lot of fun. So I would just suggest people to test it out.
Absolutely. Ben, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate you sharing your story with us. And hopefully, in a crypto conference somewhere, we'll bump into each other. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Catch us online. We're on Instagram at BlockDrops Podcast, on Twitter at BlockDropsPod or 0x Mauricio. We're on Lens at blockdrops.lens. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn. Write to us at blockdropspodcast@gmail.com, and you can listen to the BlockDrops podcast at Spotify, iColab, Faberbun Tech, and all of the other major streaming platforms. Yay! Shout out to Ben James for bringing such an incredible and unique perspective on the world of blockchain, and also shout out to Rachel Sopal for making this conversation possible. Don't forget to leave the ratings on your favorite player and check out the merch store at blockdropspodcast.xyz. This is all for today. Stay rare, stay weird, LFJ.